This video is my personal Buddhist response to the Russian invasion of Ukraine and to attempts to answer a question. As students of Buddhism, how will we relate to the Russian-Ukrainian crisis while many of us are geographically distant from it? What do you think? Let me know in comment. I'm saddened by the suffering of people in Ukraine and Russia, and I am against this war. But the purpose of this video is not to express my political stance, but rather to discuss with you how each one of us can contribute toward the end of this war by practicing non-violence in our everyday life based on Buddhist wisdom. The purpose of this video is showing the importance of seeing that the violence that is used in this war is not separate from our everyday life. But the question is, how can we see that connection clearly? And why is seeing that connection important? Showing that connection is what Buddhism can offer to the present crisis, because it will build up our spiritual foundation for transcending our geographical difference between Ukraine and where we are. That's why we've got to see that connection. With that in mind, I will first discuss the theory that underpins our Buddhist action, and then I will show you how a practice of that theory would look like if applied to our everyday life situations. But before we start, let me express my gratitude to my friends who encouraged me to make this video. My thanks go to Denise, Eva, Carrie, Pearl, Masha, Takeshi-san, and Laura Mary in the US, in the Western Europe, Vietnam, and Japan. My friend Mary said, "We need to be compassionate with both sides here, and that is hard." My friend Herb says, "The nature of aggression is really control, not greed, as some seem to think." My friend Nguyen says, "We should give up our sense of separation. It will be great if we can resolve our problems and come together as one in peace." So thank you, friends, for showing your support and encouragement. With that in mind, now let us dive into the theory and practice one by one. The theory we will apply is the Tiantai Buddhist doctrine of 3,000 worlds in one moment of experience. In this part, let me talk about how our mind limits our reality and what it means to go beyond that limitation. And these points will support my argument for the unexpected discovery of the Ukraine in your everyday life, in spite of the geographical distance from it. According to Chinese Tiantai Buddhism, the primary function of our mind is to limit the data that flows into our mind, to limit the reality that we face, to make sense of it. In other words, our mind has a tendency of bites off the reality to make it chewable, so that what we see and hear will make sense to us. This mind's act of limiting the reality has a significant positive aspect to it, because that means everything that arises in our mind is by definition, in reality, always something more to it. In this sense, everything expands into the unlimited openness to infinity. This is what is articulated in the Tiantai doctrine of Yinian Sanqian 3,000 world in one moment of experience. When we apply this doctrine to the Ukrainian crisis, we will understand that what we normally conceive as Ukraine has something more to it. This moreness reveals that the Ukraine that seems to be distanced is right here in our immediate environment. This leads to understanding that restoring peace in Ukraine can start in restoring peace in our mind, in heart, and in our everyday life. That's the goal of our Buddhist practice. Buddhist practice is peacefully powerful. A prime example of moreness of Ukraine is our affect and empathy and emotion toward the suffering of Ukrainians and Russians. So as more than 1 million of Ukrainians evacuate, people in the neighboring countries show their support and welcoming them into their homes without expecting any return. So there's a bunch of bodhisattvas out there, and many Russians, including my best friend, are also opposing to this war as well. So we are together creating a sense of oneness of our heart, oneness of our affect and empathy. In Buddhism, we know everything is impermanent. And on that ground, the meaning of a country such as Ukraine also changes and continues to grow. Now, all of our emotions and empathy co-arise depending on the present crisis. And this affective quality is the new and emerging growing aspect of Ukraine. This is the moderness of Ukraine that we are creating together, and lets us transcend the geographical distance between them without necessarily physically visiting there. This perspectival transformation that allows us to see the oneness of our care toward the suffering of Ukrainians and Russians and everyone in the world will become a spiritual foundation for our Buddhist non-violent action. But the more challenging question is this: how can we practice this theory so that we can transform the war into peace? That leads to the next and the final part of this video: practice. Of course, continuous political dialogue and economic sanctions against Russia will alter the situation, and you may be already giving some donations to NGOs, and they're all good. But if we fundamentally want to fundamentally end the war, at the same time, something different must be undertaken. What kind of practice must be undertaken? My answer is to build peace in our mind, in our everyday life situations. There will be no true peace unless we establish our inner peace in our hearts. This is the difficult part, but I believe we can do that. So the first step towards that peace is to recognize that the violence that is practiced in the Russian-Ukrainian border is also present and practiced in our everyday life. I know this is counterintuitive, so let me explain. So for instance, when my kids, 5 and 3, in the morning are about to miss the school bus pickup time because they are either they don't want to change their clothes, they're still wearing pajamas, and don't want to eat breakfast, or they're kind of not cooperating, they don't want to brush their teeth and so on. So in that case, I tend to raise my voice and capture them and forcefully put them onto my lap so that I can get them ready for school. But since the Ukrainian crisis, I've been having a lot of reflections of what I can do. And I realized that this kind of yelling, raising my voice, and capturing them with force is something similar to what Putin is doing. So I was shocked to realize that I was kind of doing the same violence in a different forms, just weaponlessly. So what is shared in the violence of Putin and me is to use the force, to use the violence in order to control our external environment. And I asked myself, am I going to continue this? My answer was no. As Nichiko Niwano, the author of the book that I quoted at the beginning of this video, says, unless I stop my own violent acts to my kids at home, there will be no peace in my heart, in my family, in my everyday life, in any of my encounter with anyone in the world. So the violence of Putin is a reflection of my violent nature in my heart. I thought this was very inconvenient truth, and yet unless I accept this violent nature that is inherent to my mind and to everyone's mind, there will be no effective Buddhist non-violence act that we can offer. So if I want to stop Putin, I've got to start stopping my personal violent behaviors. So every time I succeed to avoid using any force to my kids in the morning, in those kind of situations, I praise myself and recognize it as a small step toward peace in Ukraine. Every time I do not crave coffee that I love, every time I do not respond to an angry driver on the road when I'm driving, it's scary. And also when I stay calm in front of a mean colleague in the office. All of these are the moments I'm contributing to the restoration of peace in Ukraine that is discovered in my everyday life of here and now. And you can do that same as well in your life. Since the outbreak of the Russian-Ukrainian war, I've been including a special meditative chant in my everyday recitation. This is what all members of my global Buddhist community, Risshoku Sekai, have been doing at home altar every day. And you can find your local Sangha if you are interested. In Buddhism, contemplating and meditating on the suffering of someone and doing a Buddhist practice can generate the merit and transfer the merit to you and those who hold in your mind. If you can start recognizing the violent nature in your heart, that will be a concrete starting point of your practice that you can offer for the peace restoration in Ukraine that you can find and discover in your everyday life.